Welcome to another enlightening episode of The Truth About the Plant, the show that takes you on a journey through the world of psychoactive plants and alternative wellness, all while delivering those real actionable insights you crave. I'm your host, Christina Dees, and this is my equally talented co-host, Dr. Amanda Ryman. Dr. Ryman, you get to tell them why we're here, why we're so cool.
Oh, wow. I don't know about why we're so cool. I think that speaks for itself. But why we're here is because it can be so hard to find good information about cannabis on the internet. You may have a really pressing question, one that really may impact your health, safety, and well being. You go online to try to find the answer, and you may get 100 different answers, and some of those will completely contradict each other. So it's really hard to know who to trust. And that is why we are here. We are taking your most pressing questions about cannabis and we are giving you scientifically backed, factual, objective answers in 15 minutes or less so that you can get the information you need, apply it to your life, and go about your day. So you can think of us as your really cool aunties or your kick-ass granddaughters, basically the ladies in your life who will always tell you the truth.
That's right. And today we're diving into a question that's got everyone buzzing. And the question is it safe to medicate with cannabis? So you'll have to listen and find out what you need to know before making cannabis a part of your wellness routine. All right, so cannabis is gaining support as a medicine, and that can also be recommended by your doctor. It's being used by people across the world to treat conditions like epilepsy, Parkinson's, and to quell symptoms associated with chronic pain conditions and treatments like chemotherapy. So at the same time, the most common reasons people use cannabis are relaxation, anxiety relief, and help with sleep. So these uses are not often monitored by a doctor, and they're left up to a consumer to decide what dose and frequency is right for them. So self-medication is not new, but is self-medicating with cannabis safe?
Well, you're absolutely correct that even though cannabis is used as more of a prescription type medication to address symptoms of certain illnesses and treatments, most of the use of cannabis, the therapeutic use, is done in the context of self medication like Advil. So somebody is making the decision to use cannabis to treat a certain symptom. They're not consulting a doctor first, and perhaps they are going to a dispensary, much like they go to Rite Aid or Walgreens to pick up an over the counter medication. But there's a difference here, right? So when you take Advil, each pill is dosed precisely. So each pill has the same amount of active ingredients. And when you read the package, it comes with instructions. So take this many pills, take with food, take this far apart, take for this many days. And cannabis does not have that.
Yeah, so it's really like left up to the consumer to figure it out. So, what kinds of precautions should people take when they are self medicating with cannabis?
Well, I think that we can really look to other herbal supplements to answer this question. So, even though cannabis kind of exists in its own world in dispensaries, very highly regulated, most of us where we live have some kind of herb shop, right? Where we can go in and they have different types of loose herbs, whether this is ashwagandha or different types of teas or mullein that people use for all kinds of medical issues. And they also do not have specific doses. So it's really up to the consumer to do the research, to do their homework, to figure out what these herbs are good for, what types of preparations are best for them to use, which usually involves things like time of onset and duration, just like cannabis, and whether this herb is particularly good for them. And, we go back to this so much on this show, which is that the way cannabis affects you and whether or not it's going to treat your pain, whether or not it's going to treat your sleep, whether or not it's going to treat your anxiety, a lot of it has to do not just with the cannabinoids and the terpenes that are in the plant. It has to do with your own body chemistry. So, in reality, we don't even know why aspirin works. Like, we don't know the mechanism of action in which aspirin relieves pain. We just know that it does. Now, different to this, we're actually understanding the mechanism of action for cannabis because we have endocannabinoid systems. And why that makes this different from a lot of other over-the-counter medications is that because our bodies produce their own cannabinoids and have cannabinoid receptors all through our body, how the cannabinoids in the plant interact is going to be different for every single person. So it's really important to do your own research. And I recommend not Googling, because as we talk about in the intro to every single show, you're going to get 100 different responses, and many of them are going to contradict each other. But there are some really good health and wellness focused professional organizations out there that publish material on cannabis and health. And this can be summaries of research articles. This can be information about what medications you shouldn't use if you're using cannabis, and other risks and benefits of using cannabis. So some of these organizations include the Cannabis Nurses Association, the Association of Cannabinoid Specialists, and Americans for Safe Access, which is the oldest and largest medical cannabis patient advocacy organization that has a wealth of information on their website, which is safeaccessnow.org, about different therapeutic and medical applications of cannabis and what people should consider before they're trying cannabis. So I would recommend going to one of these organizations, not Google, looking at the resources that they have online, and then doing your own research to figure out how cannabis as a therapeutic tool may best fit into your life.
Yeah, I love that you mentioned these organizations because these are the organizations that actually care about your health and well being. And they're the ones doing the research for you. And so they have the information readily available. And or they have like the Cannabis Nurses Association who can help you with dosing and stuff. So you don't need to be seeing a doctor to get professional advice about using cannabis. I love that you're saying that.
Absolutely. So there's a lot of really good, really valid information about using cannabis as a therapeutic tool on the internet. And one of the types of information you're going to be looking for are possible drug interactions. So again, we talk about the mechanism of action for cannabis and the role that cannabinoid signaling plays to the different receptors in our bodies to moderate things like mood and pain and sleep and appetite. So there are certain other drugs that people may be taking, certain pharmaceutical drugs that also play into these mechanisms. So blood thinners are one, blood pressure medication or heart medication is another, SSRIs used for mental health conditions is yet another. So if you are on pharmaceutical medications and you start doing some research into whether or not the medication you're on is recommended or not recommended with cannabis, this is the point where you may want to talk to a medical professional. Because if you're an individual that's not on any prescription medications, that is using cannabis for relaxation, anti-anxiety, sleep, then you're going to be pretty safe trying cannabis. If you are someone who's on a myriad of other prescription drugs, then it's recommended that you start talking to a medical professional before you start using cannabis.
Yeah, and you mentioned Tylenol and Advil, which are the same product, and they also put the dosing on the bottle. But that's not necessarily the case with cannabis. So, what about product choice and dosing?
Well, we have a lot of great episodes on the truth about the plant that you can watch about product choice and dosing. And this is a situation where, even though everybody's different, as we mentioned, when it comes to cannabis, speaking to a seasoned cannabis consumer is a really good idea because they can help you understand what to expect. And when you're trying to figure out what to expect from using cannabis, as we've mentioned on previous shows, the things you really want to watch out for are how long it takes to feel the effect, how long the effect lasts, and how intense the effect is. And so, especially if you're newer to cannabis, or maybe you've dabbled in it, but now you really want to use it for a specific therapeutic purpose, talking to somebody who's either been using cannabis for a long time or who is using cannabis for that specific therapeutic purpose can really help inform you on what product choices you might want to try. So, for example, somebody that has chronic pain may say, I really find edibles to be really useful when I know I have to be on my feet all day because it's really going to help give me that sustained relief. But if I have a sciatica attack and I have nerve pain going on right now, then inhalation works best for me. So better understanding how people are using different products. And most people who use cannabis are using more than one product form, especially when they're using it medicinally. So something like inhalation is going to give you an effect relief right away. Something like an edible is going to give you more sustained relief. So a lot of times people mix and match different types of products to give them the relief they need. So I would recommend talking to somebody who's a seasoned cannabis consumer. This could be your kick-ass granddaughter or your really cool auntie, who's going to help give you some advice about what to expect and what types of products might be perfect for your specific therapeutic issue.
Yeah, and you're right. We have a ton of good episodes on product and dosing because we can't stress that enough. So we got pharmacists that help people when you're at the grocery store and you have questions, or you're at the pharmacy. What about those bud tenders? Can they help?
So that can be variable. Now, there are some bud tenders out there with a very deep knowledge about the therapeutic use of cannabis, and they really understand. Some of them have even taken certificate courses in cannabis therapy so that they can better serve their clients. Some of them have become certified ganjiers, so they understand how to ask the right questions and guide people to the right products. However, there are also bud tenders out there that just want to sling weed and push you towards products that they want to sell. Now, the problem is you may not know ahead of time what type of bud tender you're going to come across at a dispensary. So again, going back to doing your research, some dispensaries have education opportunities. They may have forums and seminars and workshops. You can go and learn about cannabis and have other educational events. So you may want to look for this type of dispensary. And there are also nurses who do consulting. So Laura Barrett, who was on our show several weeks ago talking about vaping and safety, she does consulting. So you can contact her. She's not a doctor, so she's not going to recommend cannabis for you. But if you're interested in using cannabis for a therapeutic purpose, she can talk to you about the other medications you may be taking. She can help guide you to the right products, to the right dosing. But, we always go back to this personal touch, right? It's really going to be about who you are and how your endocannabinoid system interacts with the product. So something I always recommend to people is keeping a journal. Keep track of what you are using, the product, the dosage, the time of day, and how it affects you. And I know I've mentioned this journal on the show before, but Tetragram is an amazing app. You can download it for free, and you can go in there and say, I used, 3 puffs of Blue Dream, and this was the THC percentage, and I did it at 8 o'clock, and this is what I was trying to get out of it, and this is how well it helped my symptoms. And so you're able to see over time which products are most helpful to you. And to be honest, no matter how many people you consult out there, even if they've been using cannabis for 20, 30, 40 years, nobody is going to be as good a judge as what is helping you so that you can replicate that as you.
Yeah, that's right. And it might seem like super easy to just dose yourself or follow the instructions if there are some on the package. But I have so many stories, and I'm sure our viewers have stories of people where things have gone wrong. So, are there any other risks to self medicating with cannabis?
Well, besides what we talked about interactions with certain medications and making sure that you know the right product form and right dose for you, I would say one risk is that there can be too much of a good thing. Cannabis does cause feelings of euphoria. And because it does possess less risk than other medications, including no chance of fatal overdose and low rates of dependence, people may not be as careful about moderating use. When we talk about drugs like Advil and Tylenol, we're taught that you shouldn't take too much because it can be really hard on the liver. You shouldn't use it for a certain extended amount of time because it can be hard on the liver because that's where it's processed. With cannabis, we see long-term use among people, and if they're not smoking, we don't really see a lot of negative effects. So you really got to pay attention to how much you're consuming, and you really need to be careful about moderating your use. Now, you may have a condition that requires regular use of cannabis. And we've talked about this on the show. We have an episode called, Is It Safe to Use Cannabis Every Day? And if you're somebody that has a chronic condition, you may be using cannabis every day in order to manage those symptoms. But that doesn't mean you shouldn't be mindful about what's happening with your tolerance. You should take breaks when you're able. Stay intentional about your use and practice moderation, and try to find and stick with your minimum effective dose. So this is the amount you can take where it's going to address your symptoms, but that the smallest amount you can take that's going to address your symptoms. And if you can find this amount and stick with that, you're going to keep your tolerance in check, cannabis is going to be effective for you for much longer. So I think one of the big risks to self-medicating is just it feels good. So hey, if it felt good to smoke one joint, smoking two joints is going to feel even better, and smoking three joints is going to be amazing. But what that does is it raises your tolerance so that you're going to need more cannabis in order to quell those symptoms. So it's also good, as I said, to take regular breaks, which will reset your tolerance, and it will also check in with your body about how your symptoms are doing without cannabis. So there shouldn't be this assumption that just because you're experiencing symptoms of something, whether that's pain or sleep problems or anxiety, that these symptoms are going to go on forever. Sometimes symptoms are chronic, meaning that they need long-term treatment, but sometimes they're acute, meaning that they come and go. So you may have something going on at work that's giving you a lot of anxiety. It's making it hard to sleep. So you take some cannabis to help with that. But then after a couple of weeks, the issue at work passes. You don't have that anxiety anymore. Now's a good time, even if cannabis feels really good, to take that break and see what's going on without the cannabis. And that's really the best way to ensure that cannabis will be there for you when you need it and that you're not using excessively when you don't.
Yeah, we could talk about this stuff all day long. And in fact, I just recommend watching our other videos because we have more than 24 hours worth of content and there's just so much great information there. So, all of these questions and more are answered. But what we'd really love is to hear from our viewers. So, if you have a burning question of your own about alternative medicine, about cannabis, reach out to us at info@mypersonalplans.com. Your question just might get answered on the show. So don't forget, hit the YouTube collection for more plant-powered insights. And until next time, stay curious, stay green, and keep those questions blooming.
Perfect.
I did not put myself in